talk to me nice, talk to me honestly, look in my eyes, don't let it fall.
Hey everybody, my name is Kelly Gonzalez, and I'm a part of Keep Truckin'. I'm the Director of Employee Experience, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I know it's a long title, but it's an important thing, so maybe I deserve that long title. I'm here with Kristen Moore and Laquita Morris, and I'll let them do some quick intros as well. And we're here today to really talk about how to assess if a company truly is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially when we're looking at our next career moves. So Kristen, do you want to just give a quick intro of yourself for everyone?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen. I work with the inbound SDRs here at Keep Truckin', and I've been with the company almost 2 years, so very excited to discuss this topic.
Thank you. All right.
And how's it going, everyone? Laquita Morris. I have been with Keep Truckin' for 4 years. I am a regional sales manager, and I manage the Great Lakes team in mid-market.
Awesome. Thank you. So today we're before we kind of get into how we assess if a company truly is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we wanted to give a little bit of context around in the link between diverse and inclusive teams and innovation within a company, and how companies can actually create a culture of inclusion so that there's certain things that we're looking for when we're going in the interview process or choosing a company to go to next. So we'll start with that and jump right into it. So, I think we all know that there's ample data behind the value of diversity and inclusion. In fact, there's just so much out there that proves how important it is, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because in many cases, and including this particular report from Gallup, it showed that companies with more diverse and inclusive teams have higher customer satisfaction rates, greater productivity, less turnover, higher profitability, right? All of these things I think we all know of, but the data is there and it's obvious. I think what's not less talked about is actually the link between diverse and inclusive teams and innovation. And diverse teams are better positioned to unlock innovation that drives that market growth that many companies are obviously looking for. Diversity further enables nonlinear, novel thinking and adaptability that innovation requires. And in fact, in one study of over 1,700 companies, they saw that diverse management teams were more innovative than less diverse teams. And in fact, in this particular study, BCG used the indicator of innovation was the portion of revenue from products and services launched within the last 3 years. And they saw that companies with above average diversity produced a greater proportion of revenue from that innovation, in fact, 45% of the total, than from companies with below average diversity, which was 26%. And that 19% innovation-related advantage translated into overall better financial performance. Before I move on, I just want to make sure, can you all see my slides or should I pin them? Is that better for everyone or is that just for me? Oh, well, I'll make sure you can see it all. We can see it. Okay, cool. Thank you. But what I think is important to talk about is that diverse teams are not enough. It's not enough to have representation from many different walks of life and backgrounds and thinking. And that the key to innovation relies on an inclusive workplace. So the type of workplace environment that supports a diverse workforce must also have an inclusive culture, right? So each employee knows that their voice will be heard, that they're a valued part of the team, right? All of these things, I think all of us feel that. But it's important that we say it in the data. We see it in the data as well. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the keys to innovation because, again, these are things that we can look for when we're assessing a company that we want to move to. And the keys to innovation really rely on that inclusive workplace culture. So we talked a little bit about how diverse teams are super important in that. In addition, having high psychological safety and belonging is imperative as well. And psychological safety is essentially where everyone knows they're safe in expressing different viewpoints and perspectives, regardless of age, background, or experience level. And in fact, people are encouraged to do so, because when all voices are given that airtime and everyone's ideas are considered, it drives both the insights needed for innovation and creativity. And companies really should build a culture where employees feel they can bring their whole selves to work, because it takes a lot of effort for me to change my personality for you. Effort I could be using problem solving or innovating, right, instead. And so managers should build connections with a wide range of people, and supporting employee resource groups to foster that sense of community and belonging. And companies should explicitly assess belonging and psychological safety in internal surveys. And they should reward agility and risk-taking and embracing mistakes, right? Another key to this is having that equitable access to opportunity. And note, I didn't say equality, I said equitable, right? And just to be clear, which I always say to our new hires, I give a new hire orientation, I talk about what equity it is, right? It's the guarantee of fair treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all employees, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. And the principle of equity acknowledges that there are historically underserved and underrepresented populations, and that they need additional support to reach that fairness, that equitable fairness. So what does that have to do with innovation? So if not all of your employees have equitable access to the brainstorm room or information needed to problem solve, then you're not enabling that diverse workforce to innovate. And then the last one is having a growth mindset, an action mindset, right? The reality is we all come to the table with biases. And when you bring a group of people together who are really different from each other, there's going to be conflict and sometimes chaos. And the workplace culture really has to reward growth, because we all make mistakes, but how we respond to feedback and correct a path is what is really important in this. And so a company that focuses on having a growth mindset, diverse teams, psychological safety, and that equitable access is really are the keys to having that innovation that a company needs to have. So I typically spend over an hour training managers and teams on inclusive leadership, right? But we're going to do just a really quick overview of some of the things that we do at Keep Truckin' that I think are important for you to look out for at other companies as well, to ensure whether or not they have somebody like me who leads diversity, equity, and inclusion, or if they have a DEI committee, but they should have some, if not all of these elements if they're truly trying to make a change or better the culture of the company. So I like to put them in three different buckets, right? One is accelerating the careers of the current employees that you have. The next is integrating DEI into everything that they do, not just a one-time program or an event that they have. And then connecting with the outside community to get best practices and recruitment, and actually giving back to the communities in which they work as well. So on the accelerate side, right, some of the things that you might look for are who are they highlighting, right, in external publications, in social media communications, the speaking opportunities that are given, the fireside chats, what employees are they recognizing, and are leaders normalizing risk, taking and sharing mistakes and rewarding agility, right? Do they have employee resource groups? Keep Truckin' has a wide variety of employee resource groups that get together, and they're all in different stages. Some of them focus on community and networking. Others have developed more into education and learning and development as well. We also have roundtable discussions that bring people together to talk about identity in the workplace and how it impacts them. Mentorship meetups, and then of course training for a variety of people on inclusive leadership too. And those are all ways that we can build more opportunities for employees, and companies really should have different aspects of this within their programming. And then on the integrate side, right, Keep Truckin' has regular demographics data review with their managers, and we weave these concepts into product and marketing as well, not just into HR programs. And we get feedback from our employees on a regular basis on assessing belonging and psychological safety. We perform pay equity audits twice a year. We add our personal pronouns to our signature lines. We require 50-50 gender candidate slates, diversity candidate slates for director and above positions, right? Like these are all things that are integrated into the systems that we work on a regular basis. And companies who are really trying to have that culture of inclusion will also be doing these things as well. And then lastly, we connect with the communities in which we work. And these are all different companies that we work for. Obviously, Sisters in Sales is on there. And there's a wide variety of other ones as well that we want to not just show our brand and recruit people from, but also learn best practices and learn what we need to do to change and make sure as a company we are serving those communities and sponsoring those communities to develop more people and do some workforce development as well. All right, so now we kind of understand some of the benefits and what certain companies are doing. And so I wanted really to bring in Laquita and Kristen to talk a little bit more about how can you actually assess these things, especially in an interview process too. So Laquita, I'll turn it over to you for this next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. And thanks everyone that's joining. Hopefully you guys walk away with, or you ladies walk away with tools that you can use. But as you're evaluating companies, you're probably looking at our company. You're likely evaluating other tech companies that's been a part of this great summit. You know, one of the things that you want to make sure that you are evaluating is diversity and what that looks like. A lot of times in the tech space, what you're going to find is as you're looking at these companies, they're just now getting to the point where they are, you know, evaluating diversity. Over the last couple of years, I feel like it's become something that's like really mainstream and like to the forefront where people are like, we have to, you know, catch up to the talent, and talent lies in more than just one race, more than just one gender, and everything else that diversity encompasses. So when you're looking at these websites and some of these leadership teams, you know, it's very possible that you're going to find that they're not really as diverse as they could be. And there's going to be a little bit of a lack of representation. I know I look all the time at some of the reports, and some of the reports are like, we're trying to move from, you know, 6% Black and African-American to like maybe 9% over the next year. So it may look like it's a very small number, but it's a larger number in reality. And so just as a heads up that there's still a gap, we're trying to fill that gap. And so as you're looking at assessing some of these companies, you may see some of that. So hopefully these questions that we have for you will help you dive a little bit deeper into some of the interview questions to ask the leaders that you're meeting with, and even the folks at the conference that you're meeting with over the last couple of days. So next slide, please, Kelly. And I'm going to hand it to Kristen to talk on this side.
Yeah, so, you know, as you're going through this interview process, before you even get to the questions stage, do your research, right? You're evaluating the company as much as they're evaluating you. So take a look at their website, see if their CEO has said anything publicly, maybe about diversity, or if they have any blog posts. Take a look at their LinkedIn, their Glassdoor. What are they highlighting? Who are they highlighting? What do the pictures look like? Some parts of diversity are just skin deep, so you know it might not be obvious from the photos, but it might give you a good idea of who's being presented and what topics are being talked about and highlighted. Definitely try to see if you can see their company values on their website or somewhere else listed. Read through those. And then I think it's also important to read job descriptions, see how they're written, look what they're looking for, and even, you know, in a world like this with COVID, where are they hiring, right? That can also tell you something something about diversity? Are they open to remote roles that will help them find more people across the US or globally to apply to the roles? So do your research, review their LinkedIn, Glassdoor website, even reach out to somebody. I think use LinkedIn. If you're in sales or you're trying to break into sales, you'll be very, very familiar with LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn and try to find somebody who you feel comfortable messaging and ask them how it really is at the company. Like I said, you are also taking an evaluation of the company to find the best fit for yourself. We can go to the next slide.
And I feel like the job market, it's super competitive right now. So to Kristen's point, you want to make sure it's a mutually beneficial partnership that you're entering in with these companies. And so some of the things that you want to ask there on the screen. So what does diversity and inclusion look like to you? What does allyship look like? How do you guys assess employee belonging? How are differences celebrated? You want to make sure that you're getting to like some fundamentals that these companies should be doing. You know, it's super important that you're represented, and super important that the events that have happened in this country or that are still happening, they're talked about openly and they're discussed, and you feel comfortable not code switching, you feel comfortable being your true self. So some of these questions will help you get to like the fundamentals, because really a lot of this has to do with leadership and who you're going to be reporting to. So understanding like, how does this leader feel about diversity and inclusion? That's important, because this is the individual that you're likely going to be reporting to in a hiring manager phone screen. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable with the answers that leaders are providing for you. And if you're not comfortable with it, I think it's also okay to, you know, really assess that company and ask even deeper questions. These are some to get started with. We'll go to the next slide to talk about a couple more.
Some additional questions, especially these are related back to psychological safety, right? How are ideas shared at the organization? How is information shared? Are you going to be a part of the conversations about, you know, decisions that are being made? How do you receive feedback from employees? Is there a structure of 360 feedback? To Laquia's point, if you're talking to a hiring manager, they would likely become your manager. And you want to know, if something comes up, how is that manager evaluated? How do you give them feedback? And how do they receive it and take action on it? Are there culture amp surveys, for example, right, within the company? And then based off of that feedback, what does the executive team or the department managers go and do with that feedback? And, you know, you can even ask, again, it's an evaluation of that hiring manager just as much. So what was the last mistake they might have made, and how did they respond to it?
And then I believe this is last slide with questions on it. So the first one is, what are your most important company values? I would add to that, and how are they implemented? So a lot of these questions, you know, they're just to get you started. And so there's some of these questions you can ask questions on top of it, especially if you're in sales. You already know about like active listening and listening for their answer, and then asking more questions, trying to get deeper into, okay, this is what you're saying that your company does. Can you share some recent examples where your team implemented XYZ? The question that I love most on this one is employee resource groups. You know, you're going to feel maybe a little bit siloed at the beginning of your career with some of these tech companies, because you're going to be one of just a few people there. And so, you know, some of it's going to be us just building and helping build a foundation of diversity within companies. And granted, that shouldn't necessarily be our job, but that's the state that we're in. You know, sometimes like, how can I help build this up? And so employee resource groups, that's going to be foundational for you, because you can feel like you're part of a community, and this should be like a safe space for you. So you want to make sure that the company that you're going to has employee resource groups. You want to make sure that there's pay audits to determine, you know, if you're not, you want to make sure the women and the men that are in similar roles or in the same role are paid the exact same amount. There's no disparity in income, and that your earning potential will be the same as your counterparts. So hopefully you can take some of these questions and just, you know, like I said, build upon these questions, and don't just take them for like, these are the only questions I should ask. You should definitely use active listening to like get more in depth with like what this company is actually doing and if it's going to be what aligns with your core values. And because honestly, you're going to be, a value asset to any company that you go to. So you want to make sure that it aligns with just whatever your values are. And then there's different red flags also that Kristen will cover that you want to make sure that you look out for those as well.
Yes. So some red flags that might potentially come up, and I'd say definitely trust your gut on these, even if there's other questions you're asking about performance management and just something doesn't sit right with you and how the potential manager answered the question, trust your gut. But some potential red flags can be maybe the company, publishes a lot of blog posts about diversity, but then internally there's a lack of a DEI committee, employee resource group, or a dedicated team. I think every company structures things differently. Maybe they haven't budgeted actual headcount against this, but then in your interview, is there training provided? It's back to the last slide about learning and development. If there isn't a team that actually owns diversity specifically, how else is the company investing in DEI? Also, if there's no acknowledgement of lack of diversity or awareness of current state. So we just talked about, especially within the past year or two, current events that have happened, a pandemic, protests all over the world, all sorts of things that have an impact on employees at a company. Has the company taken any stance on that? Again, maybe on their LinkedIn with a public statement, maybe on a blog post, or even in your conversations, ask the question, through the pandemic, how have employees been supported? That's going to give you a lot of idea of kind of what the support is within the company, but also that psychological safety and belonging that you might feel once you get there. And then if there's no clear path to provide feedback, going back to those review cycles or going back to internal surveys, if there's no path for feedback for the managers there or the company as a whole, and a lack of importance put on open feedback and growth, those are all some red flags that you might have uncovered by asking the questions that we have gone over. And we'd actually also love to hear in the chat, or if anyone's able to, I don't know if you can join and actually tell us, but have there been any other red flags that you've seen in interview processes or anywhere else?
Or any other questions that you ask as well to assess this that maybe we missed? All right, so we got one for companies that are not yet at a stage where they have a DEI program. Maybe they have a diversity council. Do you have any strategies for scaling DEI initiative programs as the workforce grows? For me, I think it's important to know that this is the case for probably a lot of smaller companies or startups as well, although it shouldn't be in 2021. But I think probably the best place to start is with an employee resource group, right? And so it's a group that's focused on how can this group of people, this community, grow and develop and have a business impact. And then that typically in having conversations and events and mentorship, all of that is pollinates, right? And it just grows into larger programs. Red flag we got was unreasonably long interview processes that are, it's a really big red flag too. Oh my God, I've been a part of those.
Yeah, I think also that's a good point of the unreasonably long interview process. At the end of every interview I've done, I usually ask what are the typical next steps? And if they tell you one thing where it's like a very set, after this hiring manager, then you're going to meet a panel and then an assessment and then another panel, great. But then if you find other interviews are suddenly popping up, it could mean that they're unnecessarily trying to, evaluate you maybe more than another candidate. So I definitely feel that resonated with me for sure. That I think that's my fire alarm. So sorry.
Okay. She's getting a red flag. Okay. So, yeah, I feel like the interview process too, like at the same time, sometimes if you ask certain questions, that could bring up that they want to bring someone else into the fold to sell you on it too. Maybe they want to bring another woman to talk to you about it where they didn't do something. So yeah, I would tread lightly with that one, but I totally understand what you're saying. And Suzanne added, I've interviewed at a company where when I walked it in, I felt like a real bro vibe in the sales area. I just felt uncomfortable. Yeah, I had an office that I went to where all the conference rooms were named after scientists, and they were all male scientists. And then it was floor to ceiling pictures of those scientists. So everywhere I looked, I was not there, essentially. Of course, we had that changed. And I said, how about these? And we did a poll and got more scientists, and we changed the conference rooms. Those are little things, but you're right. It's the feeling. Am I welcome here? Do you want me here? Am I going to succeed? You know? It's another question. Any successful virtual events, ERG programs you've all experienced in this COVID era that has helped increase employee engagement? I'm biased with this one. Laquita, you want to say?
Yeah, some of this stuff, because part of it's going to be also like, I don't know, there's going to be, you have to take initiative a little bit sometimes if you do have an ERG at your company and kind of have to suggest stuff, especially like we were 100% working from the office. And then last year in March, they were like, okay, everything is like becoming remote. And so it's like, we had to get creative in some of the things that we did. And so we were doing like talent shows. We did events. We've talked about, I think I interviewed Mrs. Kev on stage for like Black History. We've done a lot of different things. You have to kind of get creative within your own team, but there's so many different games that you can play if you just Google, like, I think we just Googled like virtual games and virtual engagement. And then a couple of us built out some of those games.
Yeah, I think the ones I've gotten the most feedback from are fireside chats with leaders so that you can learn from obstacles that they've faced, and then mentorship meetups for sure, just connecting people with leadership so they can ask specific questions about their careers as well, giving access to that opportunity. So I know we're at 2:00 my time. So I know we're already at the end. We would love to contact you. I'm going to skip through these other slides really quick and just end with, I would be remiss not to say this, that Keep Truckin' is hiring. We have an incredible workforce and are open to feedback and want to be better. We know that we come to the table with biases, and we need you. We need you here to help us get better. We need the strong, powerful women that are a part of this community to come. So check us out at our booth. I won't do too much more of a sales pitch. Any other closing thoughts, Laquita or Kristen?
No, I think you wrapped it up nicely, Kelly. So I appreciate everyone for joining.